Hello and welcome back to 4FS Gaming. This week is all about tools, and I know that I'd said at some point we'd talk about bows, but I just haven't been able to use them enough yet, so we're doing tools. I'm going to help you optimize your tool lineup. From essentials to optional extras, we're going to analyze the best possible use of your 4 tool slots. I'm also trying to be a little bit more active on Twitter and Discord to keep you guys up to date and do a bit more community building, so please go and check out those in the description below. So you only have 4 slots available for your tools, and there are many available now, resulting in hundreds of combinations. And the first thing that we have to acknowledge is that tools will complement your weapon setup, so depending on your guns, you might take different tools, and in this video I'll allude to this occasionally, but generally we're going to be talking about a general purpose tool lineup if your weapons don't cover any particular gaps. So let's talk about the first slot, the one that you want to be accessed really quickly, and this is where most players will put in a melee tool. Melee is an essential mechanic to clear AI both quietly and without using ammo, and even if you take a weapon with a bayonet, you will likely find that a melee tool is still needed anyway, as often they are much more stamina efficient. So here we come to a very hotly contested question. Which melee tool should you take? Well, you essentially have 4 options: the knife, the heavy knife, the dusters, and the knuckle knife. They all have their advantages and disadvantages, and I have tested them extensively, and although I don't want to blow out this video with explanations on stamina consumption, hit arcs, range, and damage for each of them, I will go over the meaty stuff that you need to know. If you would like to skip ahead to the summary, here is the timestamp. The knife is a solid choice. It requires a heavy hit to the head or a chest to kill both grunts and hives. This means you don't have to be super precise, you don't need headshots, chest will do fine. Which also makes it nice against those new grunts on Desal with the lanterns on their heads. Knives will take 3 heavy hits to kill an armored, which is very fast for a melee tool, and it will kill hellhounds anywhere if you hit them with a heavy strike, which is a big boon compared to the other melee tools. You only get 4 heavy stabs with the knife per stamina bar, so it is quite middling in this regard. The knife will not let you down in PvE, especially with how reliable it is at killing small groups of AI very quickly, including hounds. Against larger groups, you will run out of stamina. However, the light attack without stamina is both strong and fast enough that you can still fend off 3 to 4 grunts without taking any damage. It just takes a bit longer. The stabby heavy attack is also really nice against bosses, with this type of attack doing really well against Scrapbeak, which is nice because you won't find an axe or other melee weapon lying around his lair before you do a little bit of damage to him. You still have the option to use the light slashing attacks when you need to, and this lets you wipe out assassin clones very easily, get rid of concertina wire, and also piss off your teammates by making them bleed, so it has a lot of utility. However, it is PvP where the knife really shines. With the heavy attack being a stab, it is extremely easy to land on their head, which is what you will need for an insta-kill on a full health hunter. The hitbox of this stab is very generous, and this is what makes it, in my opinion, the premier PvP melee tool. The chest damage is significant enough that a follow-up light swing is lethal as well. Now, it is important to talk about swing arcs here. The devs have said that all melee tools have the same range, but this is only true in theory, not in practice. The arc in which melee tools and melee weapons swing means that they reach different maximum ranges at different part of their swing or stab, so slashing and blunt weapons suffer from what is essentially reduced range unless you have a weird part of your screen facing your target, and are also much more likely to clip into arms or shoulders instead of landing a clean hit to the head. Piercing or stabbing melee attacks do not have these issues, and as such the knife, as tested against trees, has the longest range of any melee tool when stabbing a target directly in front of you. If you want success in PvP melee, use stabby stuff. The exception are really large weapons like the bomb lance or the axe, and that's because they're way bigger and have a larger range naturally. It's a bit off topic, but this is why the saber is just way better than the machete, and why the knife is much better than the heavy knife for PvP situations. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's talk about the heavy knife. You lose the ability to stab, but you get higher damage in both the light and heavy attacks. On face value, the heavy knife might seem better, and geared for PvP, but this is absolutely not the case. The upgraded damage is not enough to kill without a headshot, and landing the headshot is harder due to the swing arc. It will, however, cause bleed on a heavy swing, but this really won't help you much at that range if you miss the head. The bleed isn't going to do the job before the melee skirmish is over. The heavy knife is similar in stamina efficiency against most AI like Armoured, Hive and Hounds. With the correct combination of light and heavy swings, you can take them all out with not much problem, but it does require more precision than the knife, as the swing arc makes it easy to hit arms which take minimal damage, and then you'll need additional attacks to kill targets. Hounds are an interesting case, as although you can kill with a headshot light attack, this is much more stamina efficient than using a knife. You're still going to need a heavy attack to kill when hitting anywhere else, and this is less stamina efficient. So given how hard it is to consistently land head hits with a heavy knife on dogs, I would still say that the knife is more reliable and efficient, despite the fact that its upper limit isn't as high. There are two areas where the heavy knife excels, however, and that is clearing large swarms of grunts and clearing concertina wire. With the low stamina light attack killing one or sometimes even two grunts in a single swing to the head, you can mow through hordes of them. And even when out of stamina, the light swing will continue to kill them easily and pretty quickly. As for concertina, lots of slashing means that it is the most effective melee tool for this purpose. Okay, we're almost there. Now we have the dusters. These things are incredibly stamina efficient. They can take 10 heavy swings to a stamina bar, mow down almost all of the AI quickly and efficiently, even immolators, as they deal blunt damage of course, and they're the premier tool for removing immolators. Now, it should be noted that I don't consider the lack of blunt damage on the knife and the heavy knife to be that much of a problem, as I mainly deal with immolators by bashing them with my rifle. Sure, it takes a full stamina bar, and it is a little bit clunky, but it means that I don't have to take dusters, and I don't like taking dusters for two reasons. Well, really it's only one reason, but it has two problematic impacts, and the main reason is the swing arc. Dusters are janky, and it's hard to hit a precise target with the duster compared to a knife. The range at which you can strike is also a little bit lower, and this is a problem when you consider hellhounds, as if you don't hit the head, you'll need to follow up with another swing. This takes longer. Against packs of 4, it can become slightly problematic unless you're really on point with your hits, and it's rarely quick and efficient. It also means that you will struggle to clean up with the dusters in PvP. While you can still one-tap a hunter to the head, landing that hit is more difficult and more unreliable. The chest hits do even less damage, so against a wounded hunter you're less likely to take them out if you don't hit the head, and not to mention that the hornskin trait means that even a headshot won't kill a hunter if they have that trait. Now don't get me wrong, there are times when I will take dusters, like if I have a weapon with a bayonet or a bow with the stabby hands trait. Dusters are certainly usable. They're actually really strong at clearing lots of grunts and hives and armoreds in a single stamina bar. They just seem to fall apart when it comes to the most dangerous enemies in the game, and they're unhelpful against bosses in a pinch as well. It should also be noted that if you're someone that likes to run stamina shots, dusters basically lose everything they had going for them, and you might as well use something much more stamina intensive. The Knuckle Knife, our last option, is an interesting choice. It's kind of like a less efficient version of both the dusters and the knife, which actually makes it pretty good in terms of effectiveness. It has the same PvP potential as a knife, just a bit more stamina is required, so it's going to be a little worse against multiple opponents, but how often are you clearing a trio with a knife? Not often. It still allows you to kill immolators with no problem, but you have to time the clicks well. If you hold melee down for a split second too long, you'll launch into a heavy attack instead of a light punch, and then the immolator will explode on you. This happens more often than you think. And the issue, again, with the Knuckle Knife is hounds. You need headshots, but a normal knife can kill them without headshots, and this means that you're going to struggle against groups of 4 with this tool. You also can't clear concertina with the dusters or Knuckle Knife, so that's something to remember as well. Okay, that was a lot. Time for the summary. Here we go. If you use stamina shots, take a knife. It becomes the best option against pretty much everything. Even without a stamina shot, the knife is probably the best option for PvP, hellhounds, and gives you more than enough clearing power for smaller groups of AI in 90% of the situations you'll encounter them. I honestly think that the knife is your best option. Unless you have a weapon with a more stabby melee attachment, then you want to go with the dusters or the Knuckle Knife, and that's because if you have a stabby long weapon, then you won't be able to kill immolators. If you've got another melee option for PvP that you like better, then the dusters gives you unparalleled stamina efficiency. If not, the Knuckle Knife will let you take players while still being able to deal handily with immolators if you find that the rifle butt just isn't enough for you when it comes to immolators. What you're really losing out on with either of these choices are fights against hellhounds. They're going to be a pain. Be prepared to shoot them. I would recommend ignoring the heavy knife. I think it's a bad choice. But if you like the flavor, pulling out and saying, that's not a knife, this is a knife, well then just go for it. At the end of the day, these are all down to preference. Play how you want, but the knife is kind of the best for killing stuff that's actually dangerous to you. Okay, so that was a lot of talking about just our first tool slot. If your loadout uses a lot of weapons with melee attachments, you might have none of these, but almost every loadout is going to have something that fulfills this role. The second slot, however, is non-negotiable. Regardless of your loadout, irrespective of your playstyle, everyone, and I mean everyone, should take this tool. Hell, if you have nothing else in your entire loadout, please at least have this. Just take a med pack. Well there, done. That's faster. I'm not even going to explain it. It's obvious. Let's go to slot number 3, and this is where it gets a little bit more customizable. There is more of a debate when it comes to optimization, so we need to think of situations that arise that you may not be able to cover with weapons alone. And a big one for me is when you have that hive on a roof or a concertina armored that you can't get close to or you'll take damage and you don't want to lose a small bar and have to heal. So you want a tool that can remove AI at range without getting close, and to do so quietly if you can, so you don't give away your position to the whole map and tell everyone what weapons you have. This is where the ranged AI removal tool comes into play, and there are 5 contenders for this position. Now these are not 100% necessary, but they are all extremely helpful. If you are running silenced weapons, bows, or crossbows, you can probably use this slot for something else entirely. Option number 1, fuses. Now these let you remove AI at short range very efficiently. They are also quiet. You have a limited supply, and you will miss with them against fast moving targets, and they're also pretty bright, so they can still give away your position despite the fact that they're very quiet. The speed with which they remove armored makes them viable for use in combat to clear rotation routes while under fire. They also have some nice utility. They can burst lanterns to start fires, burn out dog and chicken cages, or set off barrels instantly. The light that they produce can also illuminate or blind enemies and exit points from boss lairs. So there are also some creative applications using light, particularly on night maps. They aren't a bad choice, but usually I like to upgrade to the next option, which is the flare gun. Now the flare gun really ups the efficiency and range at which you can delete armored and hives. Now when traversing the map normally, this isn't particularly beneficial over the fuses, but in a gunfight, the ability to point and click an armored, and then it's dead, without spending 4 seconds stabbing or wasting ammo, it's very, very helpful. This has saved me from death many times, and it's a testament to its usefulness in this slot. It still lets you clear AI out of combat. It is a bit louder than the fuses, but it's also less loud than most people think. You will not be hearing this thing from a compound away. It still lets you silence dog cages and chicken cages, and you can meme it to shoot hunters or blow up barrels that they are close to instantly, and there is a little bit of utility in respect to lighting up an area, but it lasts a fraction of the time that fuses do. It's more focused, it kills armoreds quickly, without much effort, when you're in a fight and they're pissing you off, and that's what makes it a solid enough choice. But it is niche. And then of course we have the throwing knives, and I'm going to ignore the melee capability of the throwing knives almost entirely, because their damage is miserable. Even with the assailant perk, you're not going to use these effectively in melee under pretty much any circumstances. So let's look at the ranged capabilities. These are your premier options for removing sound traps quietly, getting rid of kennels and cages by hitting the lantern, and silently killing those downed horses. They work well against hive, but they do require more precision than flares as you need to strike the head, and they can clear armored at range too, but it just takes longer because you'll need a few knives to put them down. The cool thing about throwing knives is that they can disperse water devils silently, and are pretty much the only tool capable of doing this efficiently. You can also use them when out of stamina with a knife, and then keep throwing these things to extend your AI killing ability on grunts and dogs, for instance. All in all, they're another solid choice, but they lose out to the flare pistol in my opinion, because you can't just fire and forget to kill armored or tough AI when you're chasing a hunter as they weave through AI. Winning some fights requires you to basically just focus on enemy players, and you do not want AI getting in the way, and that's why the flare pistol's great for just removing that annoyance. There is one more newer addition to this slot, and they are the throwing axes. I think of them like big throwing knives. Now these are actually useful for their melee capabilities. I don't believe that they are stamina efficient enough to replace any of the normal melee tools. If you have an Agant Brawler or the bow with that stabby perk, then maybe this could be your melee tool. Their swing arc is also a bit janky, and this is improved significantly with the Assailant perk, but without it, the melee capabilities are nothing to write home about. They're just kind of there. Despite all of this, the axes come pretty close to winning this slot for me. The ability to one-shot Armored and Hive, kill horses and cages, and kill other AI when out of stamina, remove Concertina wire very quickly with the slash attacks, alongside the sheer pleasure of killing a hunter when throwing the axe at them. It's harder than you think. Well, these things aren't bad. They're not bad at all. After using them exclusively for almost 2 weeks instead of the flare pistol now, I am starting to miss the range and the speed that the flares offer me when it comes to point and click removal. The axes still might be a reoccurring part of my setup, but mainly because they're fun. The final contender is the Derringer. Now this is a bit different because it is much, much louder than the other options. It can be heard from over a compound away. It gives you a bunch of firepower to kill hives or other AI when stamina is out, including dogs, and it can kill Concertina Armored in 4 shots easily, and it's a lot of fun and surprisingly powerful to pull out in a gunfight. If you're taking a Derringer, you're essentially taking it to assist you in PvP fights, not to be stealthy. Clear those 2 grunts on your rotation path before moving out of cover, or take a shot at an enemy when you just hit them with the sparks but your pistol was swapped out while reloading, so it's going to take too long to shoot. The Derringer's actually really good, but it isn't that great in this role just because it's too loud and it takes too long to kill Armored. So for all of the reasons mentioned, my third slot is usually taken up by a flare pistol, but there are other many good options here, most of which are quite viable. Now to that final tool slot, and this is what I call the utility slot, and the options really open up. Often my loadout might mean that I don't need to fill one of the previous slots because my weapons have it covered, so I might take 2 options for utility. I could split these into broad categories, but let's just talk about the traps first and then everything else. The most fun traps are alert trip mines. This is because you can put them next to barrels and then people walk over them and the barrels explode and you get a kill. It's rare, it's unreliable, but when it happens, it is so much fun. And it frustrates people, so that's cool. They also allow you to instantly detonate trapped barrels just by shooting the tripwire. However, the fact that this relies on enemies not paying attention means that especially at higher skill levels, whether it works or not is really up in the air. Then we have Concertina traps. These are great for blocking entrances, slowing down revives, or blocking rotation routes. They are not only good for people who like to camp boss lairs, although this is a common use. They can trap those green poison barrels to make an almost insta-death poison bleeding hybrid trap, and putting one on a downed enemy means that you will have an audio warning if they are revived, and it prevents the safe use of Necromancer. When using these, it's often better to detonate them yourself as soon as they're placed, otherwise they can be avoided, jumped over, or disarmed before they actually create that Concertina barrier. Finally, there are poison traps, and they're, well, kind of useless. They can team up with Concertina traps to make a lethal situation, but on their own, you're probably better off with something else. Okay, so let's go through everything else now. Now, this is getting way too long. I'm going to try and speed it up. We'll start with my big recommendation, the tool that almost always occupies my 4th slot. This is the Choke Bomb, and it is packed full of utility. Yes, it can be used to counter burning extremely effectively, which is pretty good just by itself, but that only scratches the surface of what this is capable of. You can put out burning enemies to enable looting, you can use it to create sound traps and block rotation routes, you can use it to flush out enemies from cover or bushes by marking them with an audible cough, you can block throw-in pathways for enemy explosives, you can cover dead bodies with them so that you get sound cues on revive attempts, they can obscure vision to some degree, help you clear corners before pushing a building, instantly kills immolators when you're out of stamina, clears clouds of poison, extinguishes the butcher's hook. Some of this stuff is minor, some of it is really helpful, But the killer is that it can just do so much that taking it is almost never a bad idea. I highly recommend the choke bomb. Then there are decoys. These are dirt cheap. They can cause shenanigans by distracting people. You throw them to aggro some grunts, watch the hunters investigate, and then shoot the hunters. Now, the useful stuff to do with decoys really requires a specific set of circumstances. You need to be close to the enemy hunters, you need to have AI or bells or birds or water devils or something to throw the decoys at, and you need to remain undetected. If these three conditions are met, then you can bait people into bad positions that help set up nice opening shots in an ambush. However, this is niche enough that often you end up just using the decoys to destroy lanterns above dog and chicken cages, and unlocking everything else in this tree really quickly. But hey, maybe that's enough for the price. Blankfire decoys are a step more interesting. When used intelligently and creatively, they can mislead enemies into thinking that you have weapons that you don't, or combined with the guns that your team has, you can simulate a gunfight, baiting enemies into pushing you if they think you are distracted. You can distract enemies into thinking that they are being flanked by throwing them off to the side in a fight, but once enemies figure out that you are using the decoys, and good opponents will do this rather quickly, they are reduced to a funny annoyance that can be used to instantly detonate barrels. They're a fun tool choice. I wouldn't say that they're super powerful. The Decoy Fuses are yet another escalation, and I really like these. They have utilities such as instantly detonating barrels or killing dog and chicken cages by hitting the lantern, but mainly you throw them into a building, bush, or corner, and then listen for footsteps. They let you know where people are not, or where people are, which is incredibly useful when probing a boss lair. If you get footsteps, then you can use this information to place an actual explosive, go for a wallbang, or just push in. If you throw one or two of these into a building with enemies, chances are they're not going to run away when you chuck in an actual grenade. They are a great choice for sieging lairs and fighting passive enemies, not so good in more general circumstances. If you're having trouble with people holding up in boss buildings, I really do recommend giving them a go. Finally, we have the two forgotten tools. The ones that no one really ever uses except to unlock something else in a category, or just not at all. This is not because they're bad per se, but just because the game design doesn't do them justice and capitalize on their strengths. We have the Spyglass. It gives you a lot of zoom, like stupid amounts of zoom, and a lot of people don't know that the ADS button zooms it in further, and this is massively more powerful than a sniper scope. You can use this to see things that are rendered in at long ranges, and make assumptions if players have visited there based on what is rendered in and what is not, or confirm that that thing you see 2 compounds over is actually a player sitting in a bush before taking your 1 in a million shot. Look, they're not useless, but there are far more useful options. The same goes for the lamp. Running at someone in the dark with the electric lamp means they will have a hard time placing their shots on you at close range, and will most likely miss your head or whiff with a shotgun, but the lighting conditions have to be just right, and you can't really tell what is on your opponent's monitor, so it makes it unreliable. In the open, it'll just give away your position, and it also paints a target on you for both players and AI, increasing the aggro range. Now, there is no perfect setup for tools. They all have their strengths and limitations. However, after closely analysing the effectiveness of each and every tool, I have confidence that my lineup is close to maximum efficiency. A knife, a medkit, a flare pistol, and choke bombs. Of course, this is modified based on my weapon setup, but I think this is an excellent baseline to start from. I would, however, like to hear about your setups in the comments below. I do think the tools are balanced really well. In fact, they're probably some of the best balanced aspects of the game, and so variations on what I've said here are certainly viable. So go out there and experiment. This video was made possible thanks to our awesome Patreon supporters. They are all amazing and sometimes get to check out videos early if I actually finish them on time. So thank you very much, Patreon supporters. I am trying to get stuff out earlier for you guys. I do it when I can. Thank you to everyone else for watching as well. Please subscribe to see more, and I'll catch you next time. This is Ascendance from 4FS Gaming.